is your profession?
Imagine this. In front of you stands an army so massive that the ground itself seems to shake as they march. Thousands of horses, countless archers, the legendary immortals feared across the known world. And leading them is Xerxes, king of Persia, a man who believes he is a god. But standing directly in their path are only 300 Spartan warriors. Just hearing those numbers, it feels like this war should already be over before it even begins. But even with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, Xerxes has one enormous problem. To reach Sparta, his army has to pass through an extremely narrow passage, a place where his massive force cannot fight all at once. And defending that passage is King Leonidas, a man who has been shaped by some of the most brutal warrior training in the world. But this story isn't simply about 300 men fighting hundreds of thousands, because in the end, the Spartans are not defeated by a massive army, not by a monster, and not even by an immortal. The door to their destruction is opened by just one man. But this war didn't begin suddenly. About 10 years earlier, Persian king Darius had invaded Greece. After the Greeks defeated the Persian army at the Battle of Marathon, Persia saw it as more than just a military defeat. It was humiliation. Darius dies before he can complete his revenge, and along with the Persian throne, that unfinished revenge passes to his son, Xerxes. This same conflict between Persia and Greece is later expanded in 300, Rise of an Empire, which connects the story to the war taking place at sea. But our story begins on land, in Sparta, because before Xerxes could bring Greece to its knees, he first had to break a kingdom where children were taught one thing from birth: do not fear death. Fear dishonor. Every child born in Sparta was physically examined. If a baby was considered weak or physically unfit, Sparta didn't see that child as a future citizen. They saw that child as a burden. Leonidas passes this first test. When he reaches the age of 7, he is separated from his family and sent into brutal Spartan training. Hunger, freezing cold, injuries, and constant fighting become part of his everyday life. Spartans weren't simply taught how to tolerate pain. They were trained to consider pain normal. In his final test, Leonidas is abandoned alone in a freezing wilderness, where he comes face to face with a massive wolf. He studies his surroundings. He chooses a narrow space, forces the wolf into it, and waits for exactly the right moment to strike. And this single scene quietly reveals the strategy behind the entire war that's coming. If your enemy is bigger than you, don't challenge his strength. Reduce the space in which he can use it. Years later, that same child has become King Leonidas of Sparta. One day, a messenger from Persia arrives at his palace. His message is simple: earth and water. In other words, Sparta must accept the rule of Xerxes. The messenger tries to frighten Leonidas by showing him what happened to other defeated kings. He insults Queen Gorgo and warns Leonidas that Xerxes' army is so enormous that the ground shakes beneath its footsteps. Leonidas remains silent for a few moments. He knows exactly what killing this messenger would mean. War would become almost unavoidable. But then he looks toward his queen, his son, and the free kingdom of Sparta. Then he turns back toward the messenger, and in the next moment he kicks him into a deep pit. His message to Persia couldn't be clearer: Sparta will not bow. Now Leonidas has another problem. Even though he is king, he cannot simply take the entire Spartan army into war whenever he wants. He needs the approval of the ephors and the oracle. Leonidas climbs the mountain and explains his plan. The Persian army cannot be defeated in an open field. Their numbers are simply too overwhelming, but at Thermopylae, the hot gates, the passage between the mountains and the sea, is so narrow that Xerxes' massive numbers will no longer be his greatest advantage. If the Spartans can stop the Persians there, a few hundred elite warriors may be able to hold back thousands. But the ephors refuse to approve the war. A religious festival is taking place, and warfare is forbidden during it. And there's an even deeper problem. In the movie, these men have already been influenced by Persian gold. Leonidas returns home frustrated, but Queen Gorgo reminds him of something simple. Sometimes what a king is forbidden to do can still be done by a free man. The next morning, Leonidas leaves Sparta with 300 of his finest Spartan bodyguards. Technically, he's not marching to war. He's simply going for a walk. Along the way, they meet a much larger group of Arcadians. Their leader, Daxos, is shocked when he sees that Leonidas has brought only 300 men. Leonidas looks toward the Arcadian soldiers and begins asking them one by one, "What is your profession?" One says he's a farmer, another says he's a blacksmith, another has a completely different occupation. Then Leonidas turns toward his own 300 men and roars, "Spartans, what is your profession?" And from 300 throats comes one united response. That was the difference. The Arcadians were ordinary men who had come to fight a war. But for these 300 Spartans, war wasn't simply a job. Their entire lives had been built for it. During their journey, they discover a village destroyed by the Persian army, and slowly, the true horror of this war begins to reveal itself. Eventually, they reach Thermopylae. Now, understand this place. On one side is the sea. On the other side are towering rocky cliffs, and between them, an extremely narrow passage. Xerxes could have 100,000 soldiers, or even 1 million. It wouldn't matter. Only a limited number of them could move through that passage at the same time. Leonidas had taken the Persian Empire's greatest advantage and made it almost useless. But this place also had another danger. Hidden in the mountains was a secret trail that could circle around the Greek position and lead directly behind Leonidas's army. And carrying knowledge of that secret route, a man named Ephialtes approaches Leonidas. Ephialtes is a Spartan who was born with a physical deformity. His parents had fled Sparta in order to save his life. For years, he has protected his father's armor and dreamed of only one thing. One day, he wants to fight as a true Spartan. Leonidas asks him to raise his shield. Ephialtes tries, but he cannot lift it high enough. And this matters because in a Spartan phalanx, every warrior's shield doesn't protect only himself. It also protects the man standing beside him. If even one shield falls too low, the entire defensive wall can be exposed. Leonidas doesn't insult Ephialtes. Instead, he tells him that he can still help by caring for wounded soldiers. But Ephialtes doesn't hear that as duty. He hears it as rejection. And at that moment, the deepest wound isn't made to his body. It's made to his pride. Now the Persian army arrives. The first wave moves forward. The Spartans lock shield against shield and become a single wall. Persian soldiers push from the front while more troops pile in behind them. But Leonidas's line doesn't move, not even an inch. Long Spartan spears shoot out between the shields, and Persian soldiers begin falling one after another. After some time, the Spartans deliberately appear to retreat. The Persians think they're finally winning. They rush forward in a crowded mass, and at exactly that moment, the Spartans turn and attack. In an open field, the Persian numbers would have been terrifying. But inside this narrow passage, those same numbers become a problem for the Persians themselves. Arrows rain down, cavalry attacks, wave after wave of fresh soldiers is sent forward, but the Spartan line refuses to break. Eventually, Xerxes himself comes to meet Leonidas. Covered in gold and jewelry, and believing himself to be a god king, Xerxes offers Leonidas a deal. Kneel before me, and I will make you not only ruler over Greece, but commander of my enormous army. At that exact moment, Leonidas has a clear path back to life. All he has to do is kneel. But Leonidas chooses freedom over power. Humiliated and furious, Xerxes sends in his most feared force, the Immortals. Night falls. Dressed in black armor and masks, the Immortals rush toward the Spartans. Alongside them are unusually massive warriors carrying enormous weapons. For the first time, the Spartans face real pressure, but once again, their formation holds. Leonidas himself fights a massive Persian warrior and eventually brings him down. The following day, the Persian army becomes even more brutal. New attacks, enormous animals, explosive weapons. Xerxes keeps throwing everything he has at them, but after every wave, the same result comes back to him: defeat. But Xerxes, who cannot defeat Leonidas on the battlefield, is about to find the weapon that can win the war: Ephialtes. Filled with humiliation and revenge, Ephialtes enters the Persian camp, and Xerxes shows him the very things he has never had in his life: acceptance, wealth, women, respect, and the feeling of importance that he never received as a Spartan. In return, Ephialtes reveals the secret mountain trail that can take the Persian army directly behind Leonidas. And suddenly, Thermopylae's greatest strength becomes its greatest weakness. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers could be stopped from the front, but once Leonidas and his men are surrounded from both the front and the rear, there is no way out. At the same time, back in Sparta, Queen Gorgo is desperately trying to convince the council to send reinforcements to her husband, but the politician Theron takes advantage of her desperation. Gorgo endures a deeply personal humiliation in an attempt to save Sparta, but during the council meeting, Theron turns against her and tries to destroy her reputation. This time, Gorgo doesn't remain silent. She stabs Theron, and as he collapses to the floor, Persian gold coins spill from his clothing. Everyone immediately understands the truth. The man who had been blocking Sparta from acting had actually sold himself to Xerxes. But on the battlefield, there is no longer enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Daxos runs to Leonidas with devastating news. The Persian army is coming through the hidden trail. By sunrise, they will be surrounded from every direction. Leonidas now knows that victory is impossible, so he allows the remaining Greek allies to return home so they can survive and fight future battles. He also sends the wounded Dilios back to Sparta. But the reason isn't simply because Dilios has lost an eye. Someone has to keep this story alive. Someone has to tell Greece what happened here. Leonidas tells him to carry his message back to Queen Gorgo. From this moment on, the mission of the 300 is no longer to win the battle. Their mission is to make Xerxes pay such a terrible price before they die, that all of Greece will understand one thing: the Persian Empire can bleed too. The final morning arrives. Persian soldiers surround them from every direction. Xerxes gives Leonidas one last chance to surrender. Leonidas drops his shield, his helmet, and his spear. Then he slowly kneels. For a few seconds, Xerxes smiles. He believes that Sparta has finally bowed, but Leonidas isn't kneeling before Xerxes. It's only a trick designed for one final attack. The moment the signal is given, Stelios leaps forward. The Persian commander is attacked, and Leonidas reaches for his final spear. Thousands of soldiers stand in front of him, but he has only one target: the god king, Xerxes. Leonidas throws the spear with everything he has. Xerxes isn't killed, but the spear slices across his face and draws blood. And perhaps that is Leonidas's final victory. Blood is now running down the face of a man who believed himself to be a god. The 300 Spartans have shown the world that Xerxes is not a god. He is a man. He can be wounded, he can bleed, he can be afraid. And then the sky turns black. Thousands of Persian arrows rain down on the 300. One Spartan after another falls, until, in the end, Leonidas dies alongside his men on the same ground he left home to defend. But the story doesn't end there. Dilios returns to Sparta and tells the story of Leonidas and his 300 warriors. They did not win the battle, but their deaths killed the fear inside Greece. Sometime later, that same Dilios is no longer standing in front of 300 men. He is standing before thousands of Greek soldiers. The fire Leonidas ignited with his life at Thermopylae has now spread across all of Greece. 300 men died, but their story survived. And sometimes, the most dangerous army in history isn't the one with the greatest numbers.
What is your profession?